This is why I hate rumors. My heart just can't take it. So what I'm talking about today is, of course, the recent rumors that have shown up all over the internet that potentially Dark Souls 3 or even a Dark Souls trilogy might actually be showing up on the Nintendo Switch. So of course for me this is great news. I am a huge Dark Souls and From Software fanboy. Bloodborne is one of my absolute favorite games of all time. I think the Dark Souls series is really fantastic. 1 is a really difficult game to play. I don't really get too much into that. 2 was a vast improvement. 3 is spectacular. So they've been improving that whole series and that whole formula ever since they started the series with Demon Souls back on the PS3. Some people forget about the first actual game in this kind of universe that they've created was Demon Souls. And they've improved with every iteration, of course, with Bloodborne coming between Dark Souls 2 and 3, which really helped improve the formula for Dark Souls 3, even though I do think Bloodborne is the better game. Still, they've done great things with all of the games, continually getting better. And as a huge Dark Souls fan, and also a huge Nintendo fanboy, as you know me to be, I love the idea of these companies and these worlds finally getting together on Nintendo's brand new next-generation console. So what's the deal with the rumor? You've probably already heard. It was reported that apparently From Software has actually had a version of Dark Souls 3 running on the current Nintendo Switch hardware. And through that, the rumors started to report that potentially, due solely to the fact that From Software had Dark Souls 3 running on the Switch, that maybe they were considering bringing the game, or even more excitingly, a trilogy, a remastered trilogy of the Dark Souls games to the Nintendo Switch. So the real gist of this that I wanted to talk about as both a Nintendo superfan and a humongous Dark Souls and From Software fanboy is if this makes sense and if this could possibly be real. So does it make sense? A little bit. I would say it makes sense enough for Dark Souls games to maybe be made available on a Nintendo platform. More so now than ever, because we just know that Nintendo is trying so hard with the Switch to remedy so many of its recent mistakes. A lot of what went wrong with the Wii U, with their third-party relations over the last decade, really, maybe even honestly before that, kind of starting with the GameCube. You know, maybe trying to repair a lot of the things that they did wrong with their recent systems. And of course, the third-party relations is one. Third-party content, you know, consistent, mature many times, and relevant third-party content, as I like to bring up all the time, stuff that's releasing alongside its counterparts on the competition's boxes, not so much just at its own nebulous time. They really need to make sure that they're getting the right content at the right time from these other developers. And so something like a Dark Souls and stuff from Software certainly does make sense. There's a small part of me that sees an audience for Dark Souls and From Software content on Nintendo's consoles currently, not counting any other non-Nintendo gamers that might actually come over to the Switch once it releases, but of just what we know to be the current core Nintendo fan base and Nintendo audience, I could see a lot of people really wanting and trying to get into Dark Souls, and some people would certainly like it. I have to be honest, though. I feel like because so many people gaming on Nintendo's consoles currently are people familiar with mostly Nintendo's content, there's a huge disparity between what the Dark Souls games are like and what a lot of the stuff that Nintendo makes are. Now, that doesn't mean that, of course, us Nintendo gamers can't still enjoy and love and play games like that are really difficult with crazy deep hardcore RPG mechanics. I'm even a good example of somebody who loves my cutesy Marios and Splatoons and Captain Toads, but I love the shit out of some Dark Souls. Obviously, a lot of us can make that transition, but they're very different games. And so I obviously would worry, just like a lot of the industry and even From Software themselves have worried in the past about bringing that content and that series and universe over to Nintendo's consoles. The fear is that the average Nintendo gamer, whatever you want to call that, might not enjoy or, more importantly, be willing to pick up and purchase those kinds of games. And it's for that main reason, the way the industry and even a company like From Software would perceive certain content on Nintendo's consoles, that it makes me hard for me to believe this rumor, you guys. I have to just I have to be that guy and stomp on everyone's happiness, which includes my own, by the way, because I would love to see this happen, and say, really, I wouldn't put too much faith or stock into this rumor. This is one of those rumors to me that just feels too easily fabricated. too easy to say they heard somewhere some rumbling of a From Software and a Nintendo, and everyone already knows From Software is working with the Switch, which, by the way, is why this isn't impossible. I'll get to that in a second. But everyone knows that that's happening, and if somebody wanted to just fabricate the most obvious rumor that would get attention and get articles and retweets and ad revenue and all these things on their websites and YouTube videos and what have you, it would be something like this. Like, I could sit down and mindlessly create that rumor. I could create the rumor right now that, oh, well, we know Take-Two is involved. Well, Take-Two, Rockstar is actually going to be releasing a Grand Theft Auto package. All HD remasters of Grand Theft Auto 3, Vice City, and Grand Theft Auto 4. And then they're also going to make Grand Theft Auto 5 remastered as a separate purchase. And then they're going to do a Red Dead collection. And it's going to be Red Dead Redemption 1 and 2. That's what they're going to do that on the Switch. I could just say that if I just nebulously put that on NeoGAF, like, people, it would become a rumor. You'd see it on the Twitters, and people would start making YouTube videos and stuff about it, kind of like I'm doing right now about Dark Souls. So it's just, I'm really saying that not to, like, talk crap about anyone, but really just to kind of put in context how I think rumors sometimes get started. And I think that there's a huge conglomerate of people on the internet that get excited to just create something that they know is fake, put it out there on the right forum, whether it's Twitter or NeoGAF or, NG4, anything, wherever, Facebook, and all of a sudden, it's a thing that people notice and they start talking about, and we all want this stuff to be real, just like I want a Dark Souls trilogy on the Switch to be real, and so everyone gets excited to talk about it. In some ways, you could say that that's kind of harmless, and I guess that's kind of true. But in the other spectrum, it kind of is harmful because it gets people excited about something that's really just false hope. And so I'm trying to keep myself very cautious here and not buy into the false hope of how badly I would like Dark Souls trilogy or the next From Software Dark Souls game to show up on the Switch. Because it's hard to believe it until I see it. We don't yet know if Nintendo has properly fixed the third-party situation. It all looks good, which is why, like I said, we can't completely rule this out. And I'm not going to, shove this Dark Souls rumor even under the rug and just totally ignore it. I'm going to keep an eye on this because, hey, it could be real. Maybe I'm spouting all this nonsense for no reason and it turns out to be real. And I'm happy to be wrong if that happens. I'm not trying to actually predict the future. That's not what I do here. But I do have to say, let's all be calm and logical, take a step back and look at the situation realistically and say, is there a reason to think that they would bring an entire Dark Souls trilogy over to the Switch? Probably not, you guys. Probably not, even though, yes, From Software is working on the Switch. I think that could mean one of three things. It could mean that maybe just Dark Souls 3 is going to get a port, and that's a big deal. That right there is a huge thing. If it truly is running on the Switch like the rumor says, maybe that would happen. And I got to tell you, I would love that. I would probably buy it again to support it on the Switch, especially if they've added some content, the upcoming DLC and stuff. That would be great. It could mean that the next Dark Souls game or Bloodborne game or the next kind of Soulsy experience universe game that they're planning for all the consoles and PC might also be coming to the Switch. That gets me very excited too. That's that relevant third-party release that I'm always talking about. A game that would release for the PS4, Xbox One, and PC, but then also the Nintendo Switch on the same day. What a concept, Nintendo. How cool would that be? So maybe the next game that From Software is making is what they're planning for the Switch. Pretty cool idea. Or it could be something completely new, completely different, not a Souls universe game. They've done a lot of hardcore tactics RPGs in the past. Maybe they're making a brand new IP, or maybe they're making something completely exclusive to the Switch. So all of those different ideas, I guess that's 4 ideas. Could be Dark Souls 3, could be the next Souls game, could be a brand new IP, or it could be some sort of exclusive Switch title. And that could go either way. That could be something really awesome and hardcore, something kind of cutesy and dumb that wouldn't be exciting. So I don't really want it to be the latter. It'll be really interesting to see. I really feel like the simple fact that there's movement coming from Software. It's always so hard to say that. There's movement coming from Software on the Nintendo camp. So I feel like that's kind of what sparked this. So there probably is a genesis of some truth to From Software doing some stuff on the Switch right now, since we know they're a partner for the Switch. But I can't necessarily tell anyone that I have any faith that it's actually going to be a Dark Souls trilogy remaster coming on the Nintendo Switch. So one more story that I wanted to talk about that is going to further break my heart. I'm just destroying my soul on this video today talking about these two news stories. It's all stuff that's sad for Rob, which is unfortunate. But what we're going to talk about quickly is the whole recent revelation that the Wind Waker 2, The Legend of Zelda The Wind Waker Part 2, was in fact planned and in early development back in 2000, probably 3 or 4, and it ended up getting scrapped and redone to release as what we know as Twilight Princess. Very interesting news, and it's kind of sad. Actually, it's really sad to me because you may or may not know, but The Wind Waker is my favorite Zelda of all time, and it's also probably one of my 3 favorite games ever. Of any kind, any type, any genre. I mean, it's really that good to me. I love The Wind Waker so much as it is, even with how easy it is, and we know that there was 2 dungeons that they cut out of the final game, which really sucks. But even just how it released, that's probably my number 2 or 3 favorite game ever created. I love The Wind Waker. So the idea of hearing that a Wind Waker sequel was going to come, which I thought it was going to happen back in the day as well, makes me really sad. But it's an interesting tale that's recently come out and confirmed exactly how this all played out and why it happened. I guess the gist of it is that part of it was the geometry of Link's character model. They really wanted to have Link riding a horse in the new game that they were going to make after The Wind Waker. And as they pointed out, the proportions to the Wind Waker Link don't really make it so that he could ride a horse very realistically or comfortably, because he had kind of longer arms and really short, stubby legs. And they're like, yeah, you can't really ride a horse that way. So they ended up kind of reshaping how they were going to approach making his character model to give him more realistic proportions so that he could, realistically and not awkwardly ride a horse, and the gamer could feel comfortable with that. The other thing is, this was really interesting. Apparently, they acknowledged that people were clamoring for, and this is true, I can tell you as someone who lived through this period of time, people were clamoring for the realistic Zelda and the realistic Link. Everyone, even myself included, as someone who wanted The Wind Waker 2, I still also wanted this, something that looked like building off of the art style in Ocarina of Time and Majora's Mask. We wanted that next generation new graphic style of a realistic Hyrule and a realistic Link and Zelda game. That was a very exciting prospect. We all wanted that. And I actually remember I was working for GameStop at the time in the early 2000s throughout pretty much all of the 6th generation. And in 2004, I went to E3, my one and only time, absolutely spectacular, the best week of my entire life. E3 was so great that year, too, so many good games. And that was where a lot of us, the rumors were saying that, they're going to reveal The Wind Waker 2. It was called The Wind Waker 2. That's what people within the industry and the Game Informer articles were talking about. Nintendo, we expect Nintendo to reveal a brand new Wind Waker sequel. And then we all know what happened at that E3 with the whole and one more thing, and they revealed that trailer for Twilight Princess, which was the Zelda that everyone was asking for. And even myself, as a Wind Waker fanboy, lost my shit when I saw what Nintendo was actually revealing. And I actually noticed it. Again, we didn't have cell phones with the internet and Facebook and apps and all this stuff, to check news always during the day. So in 2004, when we were walking the show floor on that first day of E3, that Friday, you weren't tuned into the internet. You were just walking around, and in the Nintendo booth, they had this huge screen that was playing all these trailers and gameplay clips of all the new stuff they had at E3 that year. And I remember looking up and seeing that trailer for Twilight Princess. And I looked up, I was like, oh my God, you guys, that's a Zelda game. Look. And we saw that famous footage just randomly playing on this huge screen. They hadn't told anyone on the show floor what it was. They were just playing random stuff. And I was like, look at that Link, look at that Zelda, look at the graphics. Oh my God, that's a new Zelda. It's not the Wind Waker, it's that. And then, of course, later that night, when we go back to our hotel, that's where we got on my then girlfriend's laptop and got on the internet at the hotel and looked up what happened and saw IGN's write-up about, this brand new, there was no title, the brand new Legend of Zelda looks like this. Here's what the trailer looks like. And that's how we got our news in 2004. So anyway, I totally got distracted there. The point is, it's really interesting and sad to hear what happened. They also mentioned, live-action high fantasy movies were big at the time, of course. The Lord of the Rings trilogy had just wrapped up. So everything was pointing towards the realistic fantasy worlds, and so Nintendo borrowed from all of these different ideas. People want realistic. Lord of the Rings and high fantasy is a big deal. We need the right proportions for riding a horse. Let's just scrap Wind Waker 2 and make a brand new, more realistic Zelda game. And so they made Twilight Princess. So in wrapping this up, It's devastating to my soul that we didn't get the Wind Waker 2, but I love Twilight Princess, and it gave us the best E3 moment in history that will never be duplicated, the reveal of Twilight Princess, and it made me excited. Like I said, even though I wanted Wind Waker 2, I got so pumped when I saw what they were doing with that Zelda game. And I talked about it at work, coming back to GameStop for the next year, like nonstop. What about Zelda? What about Zelda? Zelda, Zelda, Zelda. I just couldn't stop talking about it. So I wouldn't really trade that experience just to have a Wind Waker 2 back in 2005 and 2006. And we did get the 3DS got 2 spiritual Wind Waker games as well with Phantom Hourglass and Spirit Tracks. I think Phantom Hourglass is freaking awesome. Spirit Tracks is okay. But, they've dabbled in that universe. Would they ever come back to it? Probably not. But, Breath of the Wild is kind of borrowing from what the Wind Waker did visually in a lot of ways and kind of combining that with the Skyward Sword thing. And how good does that look? So we're fine on the Zelda front, but I thought it was an interesting story and an anecdote to kind of talk about my favorite Zelda game of all time and what could have happened with the sequel that could have been. But again, just like with the first story, unfortunately, my heart was shattered. So anyway, guys, that's it. 2 really interesting Nintendo stories today. Might we see Dark Souls content or a Dark Souls trilogy on the Nintendo Switch? Who knows? I certainly don't believe it, but I'm going to leave just the tiniest little window in my heart open for the possibility because, hey, maybe it does happen and I'm just being crazy. And how about that Wind Waker? Poor Wind Waker 2. Oh, what could have been. I sure do love me some Twilight Princess, but man, it would have been really interesting to see a brand new Wind Waker title for sure. So, what do you think about these 2 stories, guys? Do you like the idea of the Dark Souls stuff coming to the Switch, or does it not interest you? Are you completely sad and devastated over the loss of the Wind Waker 2? Or do you not really care too much and you're fine with what we got in Twilight Princess and you just don't even care because Breath of the Wild looks so amazing? Talk about the stuff below. Thanks, of course, as always, for tuning in, guys. This is Rob of Rule 2 Review, and I'll catch you guys next time on another video.